Hey everyone, it's Zach Wright with Grapevine Software, founder and CEO, and also the host of this podcast video format, Untangled Vines, redefining the rules of work. And what I'm going to be doing with this series of events is switch it up just a little bit because I wanted to provide more insights on the future of work. And we've had several amazing guests so far, but I wanted to stay consistent while also making it beneficial for any managers out there, CEOs, founders, remote work pioneers. I wanted to go through each week and do a little bit of research, reading through articles specifically on the future of work and dissect those. So we're going to be talking about the future of work insights that are happening this week or around this time, right? And then we're also going to be talking about the ways that Grapevine can help and a couple of other things that we're going to get a little bit more structured here on this channel so the audience can have more to take away. So stay up to date on the future of work trends, stay up to date on what's going on with the current events of the future of work, and then tie in how Grapevine can actually solve some of these problems, and we'll try to keep this up as consistently as we can. Obviously, if you are in a startup, then you know that sometimes things come up where you have to go and do it, and some of these things kind of fall to the wayside for that moment. But don't worry, we'll continue to go through this, and if we miss a week, we miss a week, but we'll be back. So with that, let's go ahead and get the intro, and then we'll come back to you with the future of work insights. Untangled Finders, here we go. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the future of work insights or current events, the things that are top of mind in future of work today. And we're going to go ahead and start with Wall Street Journal's article, Fewer Promotions or Mentorship Opportunities. The actual title is Remote Workers Are Losing Out on Promotions. New data shows that people who log on from home 5 days a week get fewer promotions and less mentoring than people in the office. And you're going to see me look over here because I want to look at my notes and make sure that I don't forget anything that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So this article, to summarize it with the bullet points and the key takeaways, so you don't have to read it, but I'll link it down in the show notes just in case you want to. So some of the key things are promotions and mentorship opportunities are 31% less frequent for remote and or hybrid employees. Also, there's less mentorship opportunities, especially for women. I don't know why that is the case. If you are someone who is a future of work pioneer and you have any data on this, feel free to send it out to me. Or if you're somebody who likes being on podcast, reach out to us because I would like to understand this a little bit more and understand why there's less mentorship opportunities for women who work remote versus men, because it doesn't make sense to me. Now, one of the reasons that, generalizing the context of this article, one of the reasons that fewer promotions or mentorship opportunities happen is because of proximity bias. Right? Now, if you're not familiar with proximity bias, it means that, okay, if I'm working remote, but the rest of the team is working in the same location, in the same office, that is where their proximity is. And so since I'm away, they seem to forget about me, right? And that's proximity bias. And since the other teammates are in person and let's say that the manager is in person too, they're going to the same location every single day. That allows that manager to keep them top of mind. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what's happening. Honestly, I think it's wrong, actually. So I am saying it's wrong, but that is what we're seeing in this Wall Street Journal article. Proximity bias seems to be the reason for why this is occurring. Now, one of the other thing is if you're a future of work pioneer like me and our company Grapevine, then you already know this, but the tug of war between return to office or remote is still going strong. And CEOs were interviewed or asked questions or surveyed in this article, and 90% of CEOs said that the raises and promotions that they give are to those who come into the office more. Now, again, that's because of proximity bias. It doesn't have anything to do with productivity. It doesn't have anything to do with that person individually, but it's because they're more top of mind. And we're going to talk about different ways I believe that this is happening and how we can overcome it after I get through these bullet points. But that's what we have here right now. Also, CEOs that were surveyed in the same article thought or they think that we're going to go back to normal in the next 3 years. Normal meaning that we're going to go back to the office 5 days a week, right? And in my opinion, that's not true. But even more than an opinion, I would refer to Nick Bloom's research that he does for the future of work, remote work, and hybrid work, and just work in general, where he mentioned that, yes, we are seeing a plateau, but we're back, or we're actually a little bit above levels of where we were working remotely before the pandemic, right? I believe that before the pandemic, we were around 26% or 20.6% working remotely. And now we're back at 26%. And he says that the reason that, and don't quote me on this, or don't go tell Nick Bloom that I got it wrong. I'll try to find his research and put it in the show notes. But one of the reasons that this is happening is because we're leveling out on the correction of the pandemic. So we went from 100% remote in a lot of cases. Now we're going to that flexible model. And as we continue to develop this and the technology gets a little bit better, Grapevine, as that gets a little bit better, then we're going to see the ability and the willingness to expand into, or more companies to expand into that flexible or remote work option. So anyway, I digress probably, but here we go on the last two bullet points. 22% more feedback to in-person attendees. And again, for some reason, women suffered more on this compared to men. And this is extremely important because feedback is one of the key things that you can do to improve an employee's productivity, an employee's understanding of their responsibilities, and just growth development, personal or professional or both, right? And so that's very staggering. 22% more feedback to in-person attendees, and then women suffered more compared to men. I don't know the answer here, but it seems strange. Next, or the last one for Wall Street Journal, is companies are still confusing productivity with being in the office. Now, that's actually my bullet point here, and it segues into how I think that we can overcome some of these. Now, I want to start from the beginning. So whenever we're talking about promotions or mentorship opportunities being more prevalent in office, that is solely because that company has chosen to not adapt to the times that we're living in today. And we can see that employees constantly want more flexibility in how they work and where they work. And a lot of companies, as I mentioned before, are pushing that return to office because, in my opinion, they think, they being the managers and the leadership of the organization, they believe that if an employee is in the office, then they're going to be more productive. They're going to be able to stay aligned and connected a little bit more. But there's another article, and I'm just going to quote it outside of this. I can't remember the title of it, but there was another article saying that the majority of people who go into the office and work in silos or by themselves, right? So that doesn't really make any sense. But I do think, to come back to the point here, is the biggest issue here is not that remote work lessens your chance of being promoted or having a mentor. It is strictly a matter of structure in your organization. Now, the way to overcome this is to have a remote and hybrid work policy. And I've talked about that in detail. There's tons of articles out there. We have one on the website, on a blog post, how to write a remote work policy. But in addition to that is clear communication, right? And so some people will call this a communication charter, but the goal is to add structure around your flexible team. And we have a marketing slogan, but we also believe it is flexible teams need structure too. And that's what's missing here. It's not that remote work means that you're not going to get promoted, or it doesn't mean that you're never going to get a mentor. It means that we need to adapt to the way that we work. And that is the whole idea of the future of work, right? The way that I'm speaking to you now is through video. We have Zoom, we have MS Teams, we have Google Meet, we have Loom. That's what I'm using here. We have Riverside. There are so many tools out there that allow people to interact with one another no matter where their location is. And until we choose to adapt to that, we're going to continue to have articles with this title. And I want to really call this out, is that the new data showing this, again, has nothing to do with remote work. It has nothing to do with flexible work. It has something to do with old school leadership not being able to adapt the way that they work. And I should preface this is for white collar workers or knowledge workers. There are people out there still that have to go into work, and they have to be in the physical location. Mechanics, nurses, doctors, grocery store cashiers, stockers. I get it, right? But whenever I'm talking about knowledge workers, we have to adapt to give people the opportunity to have a better life and to have a better work experience. Our mission at Grapevine is to build a world where work is more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for all, right? And only when we adapt and build that structure and put that in place is when we can get to that point. These articles that are coming out, and I might continue to say this, these articles that are coming out are very, very, very misleading, right? It's not a matter of remote work, in office, or hybrid work. It's a matter of how are we managing and leading our teams? How clear are we on our communication? Do we have the right tools in place to overcome some of these challenges, right? And I'll finish on this one before I go to the next article. When we talk about this, if the company requesting return to office has no reason for that to occur, you're going to miss out on your employees. And if you have no reason, you as a leader really need to reflect on why you're asking these people to come back into the office. In my opinion, it's because these micromanagers or these traditional leaders and managers want to have control over their employees like they used to be able to have control over their employees. And for larger organizations, it doesn't even make any sense to ask people to return to the office unless they actually need to physically be there, right? Because if you're asking people back into the office for no reason and they want to work flexibly, then you're allowing them to have a better experience in your organization. You're allowing them to have a better opportunity to be more satisfied. And from my research, I've been doing future of work stuff without even knowing it since 2016 whenever I was talking about my thesis paper, the happy productive worker thesis. And what it says is the more satisfied and happier or psychologically well an employee is, the more motivated they're going to be, the more engaged they're going to be, and the more productive they're going to be. Notice that didn't have anything to do with being in the office, where they worked, or how they worked, or when they worked. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was, did they have satisfaction in their job, and did that translate into their life, and vice versa, right? So that was the Wall Street Journal's article. I have two more articles that I'm going to discuss today. And this one is from Business Insider. The last two, I believe, are from Business Insider. So this is the risk of working from home. It's kind of on the same topic, but a little bit different, as in remote workers are kind of getting the grunt or the short stick, so to speak. Because this one is saying the risk of working from home. If you want to dodge the next round of layoffs, head into the office. So let's look at what these bullet point and takeaways were from this article. Okay, so shift in power dynamics. Employees are regaining power in the employment landscape, with some companies using the newfound authority to compel workers back to the office or face consequences. Again, you have to have a reason why. If these people worked with no harm, no foul, no reduction in productivity during the pandemic, and now you're asking them all of a sudden to come into the office, you have to have a reason why. These big events that happen to us in the world shift the way we think. I mean, you can see Steve Jobs back here, right? Like, we used to have phones that only text and called. Now we have phones that can do so many different things that created even more innovation, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube. Like, you put all these things together. So the importance of adapting is the ability to innovate in new ways. If we stayed the same, or that, I rolled my eyes, like, that quote that says, this is the way that we've always done things. If we stay that way, then we're not going to progress in the working world. And us, selfishly, at Grapevine, we're not going to be able to build a world that makes work more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for everyone, right? So that's why it's so important for us to have these types of conversations. So that's shift in power dynamics. The next bullet point is risk for remote workers. Remote workers may face higher risk of layoffs compared to their in-person counterparts, as companies prioritize in-person collaboration and visibility. This is the part that kind of irritates me a lot, because in person, you can do that on a periodic basis, right? And I've mentioned this before. I don't hate the office. I actually love the office. Before the pandemic happened and I started working remotely, I used to get suit, tie, wake up early, be the first one in the office, be the last one to leave. But as I adapted, as I progressed, as I adopted a growth mindset, I loved working from home. I love working from home. And this in-person collaboration piece is really a cop-out. Because if we look at companies like Yelp, we look at Atlassian, we look at other companies who are 100% remote. I think GitHub is in there too. But these companies are productive, more productive than they've ever been, and they've been working remotely, even before the pandemic, for a lot of the ones that I mentioned, right? So if in-person collaboration is so important for your productivity, how, right? Tell us. I'm not saying it isn't. In my opinion, I don't think it has to be. I've been as productive or more productive as a remote worker than I ever was in an office position, right? And then the visibility piece. What does that mean? You want to be able to see if that person is at their desk? That doesn't mean that they're working, right? I think people have to understand that. And we have to be real with ourselves, right? would you rather have an employee who works 4 solid hours versus someone who goes into the office and works 10, but out of those 10, 7 of them are kind of like lollygagging, or they're uncomfortable, or they're distracted, so they can't get the work done? To me, it's going to be the 4-hour person, because that 4 hours of straight focus or flow, they're going to have more productivity. And on the flip side, they're going to have more, they're going to have a better life, more satisfaction, right? I'm not saying that remote workers only need to work 4 hours, but I'm giving a comparison. It doesn't matter where your butt is sitting. It matters on the outcomes that are coming through. All right. So the visibility piece too, because I want to tie in Grapevine here, is collaboration and communication can happen seamlessly in a remote working environment. Grapevine is really providing the virtual office or the virtual headquarters for your remote or flexible workforce. And what that means is it doesn't matter if people are in the office or if they're working 100% remotely, they have the infrastructure and the tool that allows them to stay up to date, stay aligned, stay aware on the announcements or things going on in the organization with our intranet. In addition to that, you can connect with your coworkers, and anytime that somebody post on the community page or the executive news feed or gives an announcement or sees an upcoming company event, they're going to get notified. And what does that do? It actually decreases the inbox and chat channel group chat congestion. And that's extremely important. Whenever I was working remotely at the last company that I was working at, we leveraged Slack, which is a great tool. Don't get me wrong, we're going to integrate with it. But what happens is over time, especially in larger organizations, you have so many channels. You have so many groups. You have so many direct messages. Over time, those become irrelevant almost. They become ignored. And so what we're doing is we're separating your communication channels and clearly identifying where you will announce certain things, where you will provide updates, where you will celebrate your wins, so it doesn't clutter your chat or your channels or your inbox, right? So the visibility, it can be done through software these days. Now, it is still important to get in person, because then it takes you beyond the squares. And that's where you can do quarterly offsites if you're able to do that, right? Or if you're a founder, you could travel to different people's locations and they can meet up with you. There's a lot of different ways to go about this, but it all goes back to having structure. And I don't mean like a strict structure, but what I do mean is like at least some type of boundaries that keep people in that area. They know exactly what is expected of them, and you know what you're getting out of your employees, right? But still giving them the flexibility to choose where, when, and how they work. That's important. Okay, so I'm going to skip past this one. It was in there too. It was proximity bias. We talked about that, but just a quick blurb here. Supervisors may overlook remote workers when assigning tasks, leading to potential challenges in career advancements and job security. So we talked about that, but that's what it means. But again, operational cadences, have consistent one-on-ones with your employees, keep them in the know through updates, announcements, events, celebrate the wins, bring in what you need to keep them updated. Also, have a career development plan with them, right? The only reason, and this is kind of going back to the other article, but the only reason that people aren't getting promoted as much as in a remote work environment is because the companies who do work in the office don't want to take the time to learn something new and learn what works for them, because it takes too much time. They want to put it all on the employee. And we are here to provide you this information, hopefully get some tips that you can use in your organization to adapt and not have to put everything on the employee. Okay. This is kind of one that we talked about too, but debate on remote work. The debate surrounding remote work is ongoing, with conflicting opinions on its impact on productivity, employee well-being, and organizational dynamics. I don't even think I have to talk about that because I've already talked about it, and I'm going to continue to talk about it throughout this video. Now, this part is the part where we're talking about layoffs. So, unpredictability of layoffs. Layoff decisions may not always be based solely on performance metrics, and maintaining visibility and connections with decision makers could potentially mitigate the risk of being laid off. Honestly, reading that, the first thing that came to my mind is what Nick Bloom was quoted on in the last Wall Street Journal article that I talked about, is that this is discrimination. Honestly, now I don't want to play that card, but I do think that it should be illegal, right? Just like you can't say, oh, we're not going to hire you because you're this race or this gender. You shouldn't be able to say we're going to lay you off because you're a remote worker. One, you hired them as a remote worker. It's on you to correct that. And I don't mean through layoffs, right? If you hired somebody as a remote worker and those things changed, you need to update your contract policy and you need to have that employee sign that, because what they signed up to was a remote position. And if you lay them off because they're strictly a remote worker because you chose to have a change of heart, that's not on them, and that should be illegal if it's not already. I don't know, but it is a bit of discrimination, and it is, or it should be, illegal. So again, that one was working from home, or the risk of working from home. If you want to dodge the next round of layoffs, head into the office. But hopefully we gave you a little something to think about there. Now, let's see. This one is the last one that I'm going to talk about, which is good because we're getting pretty far into the conversation here. But this article, again, is from Business Insider. I use Business Insider because it's free versus Wall Street Journal, which I had to pay for, but I did it for you. This title is Forcing Workers Back to the Office is Dinosaur Management, and Companies Risk Losing Out, Experts Say. See, even these topics that I'm talking about, they're conflicting. And I get why people are so confused. And that's why we are building Grapevine, the virtual office platform for your remote and hybrid workforce. So you don't have to have these types of issues, right? If you want to work remotely, you can. If you want to work in a hybrid organization or scheme, you can, right? We're giving you that opportunity by bringing as many things under one roof and providing you with a lot to keep your communication, collaboration, and connection of employees all together. Okay, so these are the 5 big takeaways here. Let's look at them. So, resistance to remote work reversal. Despite the majority of American workers expressing a desire for remote or hybrid work arrangements, some companies are doubling down on in-office requirements, implementing stricter mandates and punitive measures to compel employees back to the office. We kind of just touched on that, so you know my thinking on it. But the call out here is that unique word, remote work reversal, right? If you promise somebody something in a relationship, a friendship, a significant other, a child, or whatever, and then you try to reverse it, think about how you would feel if that happened to you. And I don't think that many managers or leaders are thinking about this, right? Or maybe not how it would affect them because they've been in the game so long that the main thing that they know is working in the office. Instead of that, think about a new person coming into an organization where all they've ever known is remote work or flexible work, and now you're telling them that they have to come into the office 5 days a week. That would be very, very hard. In context, it would be similar to a traditional worker coming into the office 5 days a week being told, hey, Zach, we're actually building a new office I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, Concord, North Carolina. we're going to build a new office in Texas and we want you to lead it, and you have to move there in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or you're going to be fired. I kind of look at that as a comparison there. If we want to have leaders empathetic, let's give them examples of how that might be, or what that would look like before this conversation of remote work versus in office, right? It would be totally moving your life for a job. Instead of that, if you can work remotely, why would you? Anyway, I've beat that horse so much. Okay, now this one is one of the reasons that I started Grapevine, and even before that, one of the reasons that I really got focused on making work better for everyone. Micromanagement and monitoring. Companies are resorting to increased oversight, including tracking attendance, monitoring work hours, and implementing performance reviews based on attendance data, which experts criticize as outdated and ineffective management strategies. What I want to call out here is that last part: ineffective management strategies and outdated management strategies. That's where we are. What remote work does makes just getting by as a manager or a leader so much harder. And I think that that is a good thing. If you are a leader or a manager, you should have a lot of work to do to better the outcomes of your employees. I look at leadership as, how can I help this person become better? If they want to be a leader, how can I make them a better leader? Or how can I create them as a leader, in a sense of like, how can I give them the tools, the resources, things that are above me? How can I find different tools to give them? Is that a certification? Is that a course? Is that a YouTube video? Is that a podcast? Is that a book or several books, right? That's how we should look at leadership. Now, that's leadership. Management is, how can we help them with time management? How can we help them with managing projects better? How can we manage them or help them have a better working relationship? How can we have them cross collaborate? How can we make them learn different strategies, different frameworks? How can we teach them to see around the corners, to be, or how can we teach them to build other leaders, right? Now, if they don't want to be a leader, how can we teach them to be better at their craft? Or how can we help them? How can we help guide them into the career that they want? And sometimes that means leaving this company to go to that company because they offer a better option for them, right? I think we have to stop looking at employees as our property, because they're not. Whenever we talk to them and we interview them, we are asking them to buy into our vision and our mission as founders. As managers, we're asking them to buy into the company's vision and mission and become a part of that community, right? So these are the things that we have to think about. Is it remote work? Is it being in the office that affects collaboration, communication, and productivity? Or is it the outdated or ineffective ways that we manage our people? Because I can tell you, if you're a manager, and this is directly to you, so if you're a manager and you're increasing your oversight, you're tracking attendance, you're monitoring work hours, and you're implementing performance reviews based off of attendance, you shouldn't be a manager. Because that, you shouldn't. It's all about outcomes. And that's what I like about remote work. It doesn't matter when you work. Now, if there's a date or a due date and a customer is waiting on you, or the internal employees are waiting on you, then yes, you have to follow through. But it doesn't matter if you work at 11 at night or at 9 in the morning. As long as that comes through and we're able to communicate asynchronously and then periodically synchronously, as well as our one-on-ones, as I mentioned before, or team meetings, then you're good. It doesn't matter. If the work gets done, it gets done. If it doesn't, that's where you have those conversations on how to you mentor that person into becoming a better employee. And if they don't become productive or they don't change, that's when the conversation of termination happens, right? It's not just like, oh, we're going to ask you to come into the office or we're going to fire you, right? Because it's not a layoff, it's a firing. Okay, so we got, I think, 3 more points here. Okay, potential talent drain. The insistence on in-office work risk alienating top talent, leading to talent drain and recruitment challenges for companies that fail to adapt to evolving employee expectations and preferences. So let's just see. I want to make sure that I get this right. So the insistence on in-office work risk alienating top talent. So talent drain, recruitment challenges for companies that fail to adapt to evolving employee expectations. It's kind of what we've been talking about this whole episode is failing to adapt to the way that the working world is working now. And if you fail to adapt or honestly, even make a decision. One of the great things that I liked about TJ, our old CEO at Kumu, was whenever he came in as CEO, he said it was the height of the pandemic. And companies were like, well, should we go back into the office or should we stay working remotely? Or like, what is the way that we should go about it? He took away the conversations that the employees were having by saying, we're going to work 100% remote. And guess what? Now we didn't have to focus or worry. Are they going to make us come back into the office, or are we still going to be remote? Like every single day was a question, and we didn't know the answer until a decision was made. Now, I don't think it was made in private. I think there was a conversation had with leadership. There was a conversation had with employees, and just the way that the world was going. And now, making that decision, we talked about talent drain here. That made that decision so much easier. And I do think that a lot of people stayed in that company because of that decision, because it took away a distraction. Because that's what it is, right? Anytime that you ask your employees to come back to the office and it fails and then you bring it back up, that becomes a distraction of the actual work. And have you ever thought that maybe that's the reason they're not as productive? Because they're concerned that they're going to have to go back to the office. So instead of working, they're going to look for another position that gives them that opportunity of flexibility. Just a thought. Okay, the last 2 here, and then we'll wrap it up for our first session. Legal and equity concerns. Strict return to office policies may disproportionately impact certain demographics, such as women and older employees, and could lead to legal challenges related to discrimination, mental health accommodations, and employee rights. So maybe it is illegal. Something to think about. That is going to be something that I'm sure is going to be talked about as we continue to have these big tech layoffs, as we continue to have these conversations around return to work or return to office. So I mean, we talked about that, so I don't want to continue to talk about the same thing over and over, but that's good, in my opinion, that these things are starting to be thought about, because it really is, right? People look at it as entitlement sometimes, but that's not the case. If you were promised a remote position and the company decides to change their mind for whatever reason, they are going against the contract that you and that company agreed upon. So think about that. Okay, the last part here is kind of tying it all together, and we've talked about it a little bit already, or a lot already. But productivity and job satisfaction. Research suggests that flexible work arrangements contribute to higher job satisfaction, retention, and productivity, highlighting the potential drawbacks of rigid return to office policies for both employees and employers. So it's really the underlining theme of this episode is, if the research suggests that flexible work arrangements contribute to higher job satisfaction, retention, and productivity, and you're able to do this, again, let's preface that because I know a lot of people get upset. It's like, oh, well, not everybody can work remote. I get it. But in some cases, I bet a lot more organizations could work flexibly opposed to that rigid return to office policy. And if your employees are not satisfied or satisfied or engaged, what do you think that your productivity is going to do? It's going to go down. What do you think your retention is going to do? They're going to go seek where they can have that flexibility. Again, it's not remote work versus flexible work versus in the office. It's about how we work. It's about how do we work now that we've gone through this big pandemic and we've seen that work can be done in a different way than we thought about. In addition to that, how can we improve leadership and management to get away from the outdated and ineffective strategies that we've done in the past? How can we recreate, or dare I say, redefine the rules of work where we take everybody into consideration and we make work more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for everyone, right? So, as I mentioned, on some of these I'll go through and talk about Grapevine too, but I wanted to keep everybody up to date on the future of work, hot topics, the current topics that we're talking about. And as a reminder, I will link these articles in the show notes. For Wall Street, you will have to have that the subscription, but a little trick is you just listen to it instead of actually read it, and you can get it for free. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you like this episode, as we're going to try to make these weekly episodes so you can stay up to date on the future of work. Be sure to hit subscribe and like the videos. The algorithm loves when you do that. I took that from TK Cater. Don't hurt me. Thanks so much, and we will see you on the next episode.